it feels an awfully long time ago that Councillors Carroll, Costa, Tisi and myself got together to put aside party political differences and try to put together a motion that set out practical steps for addressing the public debate that was taking place at the time in a very heated way, but obviously has carried on more recently around race and racism earlier this year. The public debate on this issue has often included reflections on our own history, the structures within our public institutions, and how we relate to different cultures and communities. When traversing this huge sort of tapestry of different issues, it's easy to engage in debates around the very fabric of our society, and creating practical steps to do our small bit to advance positive change is sometimes more challenging. The motion before us tackles this hugely important matter soberly and with clear positive outcomes in mind. Collecting high quality diversity data within RBWM and comparing this to our local demographics will enable us to ask meaningful questions on whether there are any perceived or actual barriers people from different backgrounds applying for roles face. It may well be that there are no barriers, and yet if there are barriers, perceived or otherwise, they can be tackled by having a greater understanding of the data. And I believe we already collect some data, and hopefully this motion will take that on to the next stage. It's also important to engage in regular equality and diversity training, which is a standard part of corporate and public institution life. There is no reason that the same standards should not be applied to councillors. We are required to undertake training on a number of issues, and ensuring we are addressing any potential barriers to opportunities for all to succeed is hugely significant. It's also important that we understand our history in all of its complexities. As a nation with a history dating back millennia, we have some dark chapters, but we also have some very inspirational ones. And slavery is an example of a stain on our history, and yet it was the Royal Navy and the British government at the time that put an end to the slave trade. The history of empire, which of course slavery is a major part, is complex, and countless academic tomes have sought to understand its full impact. But what this motion is asking for us all to do, and for our schools to do, and for our organisations and partners to do, is to try to encourage the fullest possible understanding of our history. So I hope you will all support this important motion to take practical steps to ensure we're responding reasonably and with due consideration to the cares expressed around race and racism in recent public debate. I'm sure, and I hope that we'll have a good debate about this item, and I'm happy to answer when I'm summing up any queries that anyone has at the end. But I'm sure lots of members will want to talk on this very important subject. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor McWilliams. Do you have a seconder?
Yeah, that's me, Madam Mayor.
Councillor LibDem de Costa, do you reserve your right to speak later,
No,
or you want to
I'll
speak now?
if I may.
Please go ahead.
Thank you. I agree with everything that Councillor McWilliams has said, and I just want to hold up a mirror of best practice to what we're doing. So the fight for justice and equality goes on from one generation to the next. Today, it's the turn of our generation and our council to push further back the boundaries of inequality and injustice. But let's not kid ourselves. Racism exists. Structural inequalities exist. A rudimentary comparison of the ethnicities of councillors, comparing its ONS data for RBWM and our surrounding councils, indicates, amongst other things, that Black people are not just massively underrepresented on council, but the situation is getting worse. By the grace of the Mayor, this motion is being presented today, which is propitiously also the date that the Lawrence report entitled An Avoidable Crisis was published, led by Baroness Doreen Lawrence, mother of the late Stephen Lawrence. The report calls for the urgent need for action to tackle health inequalities, to plug the gaps in data, and to end structural racism through training, education, and engagement. In particular, the Lawrence report calls for a race equality strategy developed with Black and Asian minority ethnic communities and with the confidence of all those it affects. A national strategy to tackle health inequalities. Equality impact assessments to be used much more effectively to shape and inform policy, and policymakers to tackle structural racism with their decisions. The publicity of ethnic pay gaps to mirror gender pay gap reporting. Diversity of the school curriculum to ensure that it includes Black history, Black British history, colonialism, and Britain's role in the transatlantic slave trade. As Councillor McWilliams has said, it doesn't deny the fantastic things that this country has achieved. A strategy with clear targets to close the attainment gap at every stage in a child's development. Now, I'm very proud of Councillors McWilliams, Tisi and Carroll and our work in developing what I hope will be a pivotal motion towards equality and justice in this borough. Working together, we have created something that already covers most of the key suggestions of today's Lawrence report, with the exception of the Equality Impacts Assessments recommendation. With this motion, we are taking action with a sense of urgency. This motion will allow us to plug the gaps in data and identify issues annually, including health inequalities that need addressing. Voting for this motion will help make progress on ironing out structural racism through appropriate education and training. Together, we'll create a forum, a conference where people can be listened to and we can learn from one another. But the process is as important as the outcome. It will be iterative, with progress steered by a cross-party group. We will give people an opportunity to speak and to be heard, and most notably through a conference in the borough. We will reach out to experts and residents, especially from the Black and minority ethnic communities, to help us reach high levels of attainment, excellence. But some of you may ask, well, where's the money going to come from? Well, our enthusiastic officers have already said to me, they've done some work on the issues and tell me that we can apply for external funding in Section 106 money to be able to deliver the project and pay for some of the expertise and consultancy. This is the chance to subtly change the structures within RBWM to ensure that injustices do not happen, to ensure that we are working together, a social biodiversity with all the ensuing benefits. Today we start work on tackling racism, and I challenge other councillors to bring forward future motions to tackle EQIAs, EIAs, and other protected characteristics. Please to vote for this slightly amended version, which includes a slight adjustment to point 2 to allow for greater flexibility to choose the correct types of mandatory training. So this is the adjustment. 3 words: introduce mandatory training such as unconscious bias training for councillors and officers. Why mandatory training? Well, this is about helping us to achieve consistent and excellent standards of decision-making and actions. I want to close with the words of Baroness Doreen Lawrence. If you make racism right, it's right for everybody. We are looking for justice and equality. That is all we are asking for, nothing more. Please vote for this motion.
Councillor Carroll? Sorry, McWilliams. Sorry, Councillor McWilliams.
Yes, thank you very much. Sorry, go on.
Just to say that Councillor Costa is suggesting an amendment. Are you going to accept that?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I think the 3 additional words help create flexibility and future-proofs the motion. Just for clarity, everyone, that is to say, introduce mandatory training, such as unconscious bias training. And for the reasons that Councillor Costa set out, I think it's a minor change which should hopefully not affect the motion that much. So I'm more than happy to accept.
Thank you. I've just circulated it to all councillors. Okay, so it's been sent to all the councillors. Let's see if they agree on that. No?
Councillor Williams accepted.
Oh, you have accepted.
Now we go for the debate.
Okay, all right. So we'll continue the debate. Do we continue on the amendment, or we just go back?
The amendment's been accepted.
Yeah.
Now we debate that.
Okay. All right. Councillor Tisi, you have your hand raised. Do you want to speak?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd just like to begin by thanking Councillor McWilliams for his willingness to work collaboratively on this motion. For some people, perhaps even some in this room, who might be privileged enough not to face discrimination in their everyday lives, it might be possible to ignore the level of inequality in our society, or that our institutions are run in ways that disadvantage whole groups of people. But when research shows that Black boys are 3 times more likely to be permanently excluded from school, job applicants with white sounding names are called to interview far more often than those with Asian or African sounding names, and Black women in the UK are 5 times more likely to die during pregnancy and childbirth than white women, then we can't ignore that structural racism is embedded within our society, and that could include our own organisation. As an organisation, RBWM must hold itself to the highest possible standards and should be seeking racial equity for its employees, members, and the residents we represent and work for. This seems like a huge undertaking, but I think this motion offers some practical initial steps. I believe that education is one of the best tools we have in our efforts, and I'd like for us to harness the excellent cultural services that we have in the borough to support this aim. We should be celebrating the lives and achievements of Black Britons through exhibitions and events such as Black History Month, and help residents to understand our colonial past, however uncomfortable this may be, and how it impacts today. The library already do excellent work with their reading recommendations and could be used to promote books by Black authors and on the subject of racism. As members, we must set an example and educate ourselves through appropriate training to prevent unintentional microaggressions of the kind I've sadly witnessed in council meetings, such as people repeatedly mixing up people's names and confusing people, as well as allowing exploration and awareness of larger issues, such as the lack of diversity in councillors. It's vital we ask ourselves some difficult questions, and more importantly, we listen to and learn from the lived experiences of people. And I think the proposed summit will be an excellent opportunity to do this. Supporting this motion isn't about ticking a box and moving on feeling smug that we've done something about racism, but rather it's a commitment to starting the conversation about inequality in our borough, whatever form this takes. And as the great Maya Angelou said, do the best you can until you know better. Then when you know better, do better. Well, this is our chance to do better, and I would urge you to support the motion. Thank you.
Now, Councillor McWilliams, it's your turn to summarise.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I think there's just a few points that'd be worth picking up after what was a good half-hour debate there. There are no direct costs arising from this motion. I think, as Councillor Rayner pointed out, we're actually already collecting this data, and the training is already available, and in terms of any future conference event or whatever it might be, I think Ms. Costa spoke well on the need for external funding supply. That we all know about the financial constraints at the time. So how that is funded, I think, is a decision for the future. There's no direct cost arising from this motion. There was a mention about we already collect data. Yes, we do, but it's about how we analyse that data and to what end, and that's what this motion seeks to advance. On the unconscious bias training specifically, which I think Councillor Hunt mentioned, it's worth noting the amendment that I accepted at the beginning of the debate opened this up to create greater flexibility, so that we were looking at the best courses and training sessions possible to support colleagues. Councillor Hunt also mentioned the importance about teach about modern day slavery. I think absolutely that is so important that we understand that issue, and our Member of Parliament, Prime Minister, and beforehand has done a lot of work on modern day slavery and tackling that. That's absolutely very important to do. I think and Councillor Waters mentioned that what about celebrating all the different other groups within RBWM, and absolutely we should celebrate everyone always, but there is a very specific community that has done a lot for RBWM, and seeing how we can champion that work, I think is always a good thing to do if we want to hold other events for different demographics or different denominations, whatever it might be. Then I'm sure members can bring motions to that effect, because we should absolutely celebrate everyone always and all of our residents for all of the outstanding work that they do. But colleagues, thank you very much for the good debate on this topic. I hope you will all support the motion and hopefully do our own little bit to advance this important cause. Thank you very much.
Yeah, the results are 31 for, 2 against and 7 abstentions, so the motion's carried.